We've got some tips on how to die better. There you go. That's something you don't hear very often. And then we're also going to talk about 2 phases of retirement. Retirement, in fact, consists of 2 very distinct phases that we're going to be talking about on the program, and sort of explaining the 2 phases and kind of what you need to do to be best prepared for them. So welcome on into the program. This, of course, is Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. One of Central Florida's longest running radio programs, also a top 25 financial planning podcast. So make sure you check us out on your favorite podcast platform or our YouTube channel as well. Any trouble finding us on any of those various platforms, go to our website at Nelson Financial Planning, and you'll see the icons. They'll get you immediately connected over. Once you have done that process, well, then make sure you hit that subscribe button, because then you won't have to do it again. You'll be like automatically subscribed and then get notification when we upload new information. My name is Joel Garris, Certified Financial Planner, Certified Financial Fiduciary at Nelson Financial Planning, where we got a team of great folks. Obviously, you got to listen to a couple of them on last weekend's show. Kristen Costello and Chet Cowhart had co-hosting duty last week, so we appreciate them subbing in while we were out of town. And but now we are back and ready to talk about all things financial. And I guess, despite the government shutdown, the government shutting down, we're still working, and I presume and hope that you are as well. Market's not necessarily impacted in any significant way just yet on that, although not sure you kind of want to fly these days, given some of the delays that have been happening. Unfortunately, starting to see these shutdowns on a regular basis every 3 or 4 years if you look historically. So that is, I guess, unfortunately, all part of how the folks in Washington operate these days. But as we said, we're still working. We got a big development that we're going to announce on the program this week, and that is, and we're going to hold it up for our YouTube audience, the shipment of our companion workbook to our 2023 book, Next Gen Dollars and Cents. We decided a couple years had passed since our original book about Next Gen Dollars and Cents, which if you're familiar with the book, you realize that it is a host of chapters about different topics that you're going to encounter in your financial life. And so after that was published and well received, we still heard a lot from folks of, wouldn't it be great if there was something that we could use that would create some practical tips, some tools, and we heard you. And so ultimately created the workbook. The thought behind a workbook, as you might well imagine, is it's designed to go sort of hand in hand with the book itself. And but at the end of the day, sometimes when you read stuff, you don't necessarily really truly integrate it into kind of your daily life or daily practice. So along comes the workbook, which we wrote over the course of the summer. Each chapter of the workbook, hence that's why it's called a companion workbook, intended to go hand in hand with our book, Next Gen Dollars and Cents, whereby the workbook obviously is divided into chapters of identical chapters as what the book has. And then each one of sort of the workbook chapters start off with a chapter summary, so just to kind of summarize the material that was in the book. And then it includes a variety of key terms, sort of to give you some definitions to some of the key terms that you might encounter on a particular topic, whether that's mortgages or stocks or bonds or whatever the case may be. And then probably one of the most important things is it also has 2025 updates. So there is a host of new material in there. A lot, obviously, from the One Big Beautiful Bill that is packed into this workbook. And then there's exercises, like real, pen on paper or pencil on paper types of exercises that help you strategize about budgeting or creating an emergency savings account, or maybe which mortgage might be right for you. A host of exercises in the workbook, and then of course a little Q&R kind of thing that ends at the end of each of the individual chapters of the companion workbook. So kudos to the team at Nelson Financial Planning. Obviously, everyone sort of participated in getting this book together. Yes, actually, humans did write it, not AI. And so the goal is to really kind of use this as an additional resource for our book that was published a couple of years ago, where you have each chapter sort of aligning with a corresponding chapter in the book. It's meant to use the workbook sort of, kind of simultaneously or hand in hand with the book itself, where you can easily kind of reference the book, which would have more in-depth conversations. The updates for 2025, it kind of surprised me as I was going through and writing the book, or the workbook, just how many chapters required an update just within a 2-year period of time. So whether it was the chapter on Social Security or the chapter on retirement accounts, certainly the chapter on taxes, all of those required an update. So a host of good new information in there. And then, of course, the exercises and the review questions are meant to be a little bit more of an engagement and assistance in helping people to really take the concepts that the book talks about and ultimately kind of be able to work with them to help learn them even more. And then, of course, lastly, each chapter in the workbook actually ends with a little QR code that connects you over to a video for each chapter as well. So certainly more than just a supplement to our book of a couple of years ago. The workbook and, the timing, obviously not mistaken. Good time of year to be bringing out something along those lines where, we start to talk about financial literacy and how you can achieve your financial goals. And, it really does become more of a conversation starter, if you will. Obviously, with the holidays coming up, you've got an opportunity to maybe share this with you and the rest of your family. It's really designed, as the book was, and still is for that matter, designed to really be a useful guide no matter where you are in your financial journey. So whether you are fully retired or whether you are just kind of starting out, there's definitely information in there for wherever folks are on their financial journey. So just like we did last time when the book came out, obviously for our listing audience, it's available on Amazon, but they'll charge you money if you reach out to us, courtesy of our website at Nelson Financial Planning, or just give the office a call at 407-629-6477. We'll be happy to send you out your complimentary copy just by being a listener of the radio program and podcast. So make sure you kind of reach out to us. A great little resource that you might find an opportunity, particularly as the holidays are rapidly approaching. I mean, they're like Thanksgiving, Christmas is literally right around the corner, where you've got an opportunity to maybe use this as a good resource to help get some conversations started with maybe yourself or your spouse or perhaps the next generation in terms of what some good financial strategies are and how you might really be able to work through them on a real-time basis. So that's the companion workbook released early. We thought it was going to actually come a little bit out a little bit later, but lo and behold, it came out this past week. And so super excited to be able to share it with you along with your friends and family as well. So, with that, we're going to slide to a break and continue the conversation here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. We're going to talk about some of the ways in which you can perhaps die better. Maybe there's not a better way to die because, once you're dead, you're dead. But these tips are designed to perhaps give you something to allow you to be a little bit better prepared. And a lot of this material comes from Chapter 19 of our book. It also featured in Chapter 19 of our companion workbook that really kind of digs into these concepts. So we're going to talk about the concepts and kind of some of the exercises that you can do, or at least that the workbook does, to help you really get a better perspective on how to die better. Maybe I could have come up with a better way to describe this segment other than how to die better. But anyway, you get the point, I think. Death and taxes, two of life's certainties, that is for sure. Summer series for the show was very heavy on taxes, thanks to the One Big Beautiful Bill. So here, kind of in the fall, we're talking a little bit more, I guess, about death and the other side of the death and taxes equation. Really trying to give an overview of some of the most critical concepts to understand and some of the common pitfalls that happen. So we want to talk first about how sort of property passes. And the reality is that property can pass in one of three main ways. It's by operation of law, it's by operation of contract, or it's by a will. And each method sort of has different implications from an estate planning perspective. So when we think about operation of law, that is based on the specific titling or registration on a particular account. So, and what happens with that is that whoever winds up with that money is going to, or that particular account or that asset, is going to be based on kind of who's on the ownership record of that particular asset. Easiest example to come up with if it's a jointly owned property, right? If it's a jointly owned property of any kind, whether that's real estate, an investment account, or what have you, one person passes, assuming it's joint tenancy with the rights of survivorship, then it automatically goes to the other person. That is the concept of operation of law. It doesn't have to go through probate or anything like that. That just happens automatically. So titling on that is very important in order to take advantage of the ability to pass property courtesy of the operation of law. Next one is operation of contract, and this typically involves sort of naming beneficiaries on a particular asset's title or account registration. So here you would think about retirement accounts or payable on death, or even trust would be considered operation of contract. After all, that's kind of what trust is. And ultimately what happens with these types of designations is that when someone passes, then whoever has been named as the beneficiaries on the particular asset is going to automatically receive that particular asset, right? So transfer on death, payable on death, typically of what you would see in a retirement account or insurance policy. The key detail here is that both of these, operation of law, operation of contract, right? Titling of an asset or naming beneficiary on a particular asset, those are always going to trump the third option, which is having property pass by operation of will. So what that means is that all that a will does is just specifies the game plan that the court system is going to use during the course of probate. A lot of folks believe that having a will is a way to avoid probate. Actually doesn't avoid probate at all. It's the will that actually gets used in probate. If you want to avoid probate, then you have to start thinking more about the operation of law concepts, the operation of contract concepts, because those are going to allow that property to pass through named beneficiaries or through specific account registrations without having to go through probate. So that's a pretty important distinction. And one of the exercises that we do in the workbook is we ask you to kind of go through that process of going through each asset that you have and categorizing it and saying, okay, for this for this account or this piece of property or this asset, how is which category out of these three are going to apply when something happens to me to pass this on to my ultimate beneficiaries? So, is it based on looking at the titling of the asset? Is it going to be by operation of law, based on, okay, this account has beneficiaries? That's going to be operation of contract, and then lastly is operation of will. So the one of the exercises in the workbook sort of really kind of outlays, okay, put in under the category of operation of law the assets that would pass by operation of law, put in the category of operation of contract all the assets that would pass by operation of contract, and then lastly the third one, well, if there's a bunch of assets listed in that, you need to look at ways to move assets out of that particular category in terms of how they're going to pass and shift them over to these other categories, operation of law, operation of contract. They're going to allow those assets to pass without having to go through probate. So really key concepts there, and then how it all relates back to helping you die, I guess, a little bit better in that your beneficiaries don't have to chase certain things through probate. Along the way, of course, obviously there's valuable documents to have, sort of the essential estate planning documents, things like power of attorney, things like healthcare surrogate, living will. The key thing there is that those documents work as long as you are alive. Once you pass, then those documents are no longer effective. A lot of people think that those documents continue on after someone passes. Those documents in particular end when that person ends. Right? I guess that's the same way. So, because the reality is that all of those documents are designed to act on behalf of the person. If you think of it like a power of attorney and healthcare surrogate, you're naming somebody to act on your own behalf. Okay, so if you no longer can act because you're dead, then so too does those documents become rendered completely ineffective. So really important to kind of understand when those documents will apply and when they don't, and then most importantly, make sure that whoever you name as that decision maker, you better be comfortable, because they're going to have a lot of power to be able to do whatever they want to do when it comes to those types of assets. Trusts are obviously another kind of important component of estate planning. Generally, what we would say on that is that you want to basically use a trust, which is effectively a contract designed to sort of set up guardrails for how assets are going to get used after you pass. And ultimately, the way that we always think of it is think of it if you need a trust if you don't trust your beneficiaries. I think is a great way to kind of summarize kind of those situations where you would say, yeah, you know what, I need a trust because I don't trust my son, or I don't trust my daughter, or I don't trust the spouses. Those are the kinds of situations where you would look at and say, okay, we're going to have some kind of a trust agreement as well. So certainly some pretty key takeaways there. Make sure you kind of know what each asset or what category each asset falls in order to make sure that it's going to avoid probate. Take the time and double check those beneficiaries and keep them up to date. That's so important to make sure that they stay up to date and reflect what you want to have happen now, not what you might have wanted to have happen 5 years ago. With that, we're going to take a break and continue here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. I was thinking about this notion of retirement, and retirement sort of is, I guess the analogy would be that when you think about retirement, it's two phases. It's almost like an old vinyl record, right, where you had side A, side B. Retirement, in fact, has a side A and a side B, and maybe has more in common with those old records than we think, simply because there are definitely distinctly two phases of retirement. We see it often with clients. There's the early years, the active, the adventurous years, and then the years where less of that kind of activity happens. And it's interesting because most people think that I'm going to need more money in those latter years of retirement. The reality is, and there's a ton of studies on this that say that you actually need more money in those first few years of retirement when you're young and active. We just actually had a young and recently retired couple last weekend closed down Oktoberfest in Munich. That's about as adventurous as you can get, and certainly a pretty active start to one's retirement when you're in there in the big beer tents and having a good time with your 10,000 of your closest German neighbors. But that's an interesting way to start retirement. But we had a couple that did that, and that's exciting. But that also means that you need money to do that because that's not next door. So that's the point about thinking about retirement and sort of the two phases of retirement, where that first phase of retirement is going to be different than the second phase. And important to recognize that, in the first few years of retirement, the chances are very high that you're going to actually spend more money than in the latter few years of retirement. Another sort of key takeaway that we always talk about on the program and when we meet with people in the office is, one of the key components of a successful retirement is the importance of kind of of having emotional resilience and contentment sort of as we go through the aging process. And it kind of goes to the point of there's so much more to retirement than just kind of the numbers. I always start sort of retirement planning conversations off with the same question, which is, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? I typically would say, you're a young person, because reality is I'm getting closer and closer to those ages. So yes, still young. And so we always ask that question right at the very beginning to kind of get a reaction of what people have thought about, because the reality is that you really do want to have sort of a plan of action beyond the kind of the financial side. I mean, there's a lot of non-financial components that come with retirement that are certainly very important to discuss. I mean, we see the studies, right? So if you stop working and just sit around the house, you're going to increase your chances of your memory declining, your physical health declining, and ultimately that's not very good. That's going to lead to a less than desirable retirement. So the key takeaway for that is really you've got to kind of have a plan of action, and not just the financial. I mean, obviously the financial is pretty darn important, of course, but you've also got to be thinking about it from that non-financial point of view, and ultimately how you're planning on spending your time. Now, obviously the financial stuff is pretty important, right? And that's with making sure that you kind of really start out with making sure that you still have some form of an emergency savings type of an account for kind of all of those unexpected types of expenses. A lot of folks think, oh, I got retired. I'm retired now, so I don't necessarily need to have an emergency savings account. And that's not the case at all. I mean, you still have emergencies when you're retired that are going to cost you significant sums of money, whether it's leaky roof or car accident or whatever the case may be. So if that is the case, then you need to make sure that you are continuing to maintain a good level of an emergency savings account. So just because you're retired doesn't mean that changes. It's still important to have that. Along with that, we often talk about sort of the diversification from a tax nature of different types of accounts. It's important to have not just diversification from an investment perspective, but also diversification from a tax perspective, right? Because if all of your assets are pre-tax, well, that's fine, but just know that when you take money out, they're all going to be, every dollar you take out is going to be taxed as ordinary income, versus if you have some buckets that are filled with after-tax dollars, then as you take those dollars out, the only thing you're going to have to pay tax on is the capital gain. So the importance of tax diversification certainly make some sense when it comes to your overall financial plan for retirement. Of course, with retirement, you got to continue to also maintain some type of a budget structure, or at least a rough idea of how much you are spending. Sort of like one of those same things as the emergency savings account. You need to make sure that you continue to have an emergency savings account in retirement. The reality is that, you want to continue to have some form of a budget as well in retirement in order to make sure that you've got a handle on kind of the money coming in and money going out. And of course, the three key pieces of that we talk about all the time is make sure you've accounted for health care. Estimated cost per person on that is like, over the course of the remaining lifetime of a 65-year-old is over $170,000. So got to kind of budget accordingly on that. And then taxes, don't forget that. In retirement, people sometimes forget that, oh, wait a minute, I got to figure out a way to make sure that my taxes are getting paid, right? If you're working and collecting a paycheck, well, then, your employer kind of takes care of that and sends a bunch of money off to the government. When you're retired, now that responsibility is on you, so you have to do that. And then the third item is kind of this notion of free time expenses. That's this notion of, hey, if I want to travel to Europe and go to Oktoberfest, like this recently retired couple of ours did, that's going to take money. So you need to make sure that you budget accordingly for that. So even in retirement, the importance of a budget is still pretty important. And then I guess lastly with that would come down to the timing of when to collect Social Security. That's certainly a very major topic when it comes to sort of the timing. And really, I think it's really a case-by-case basis, and that's why we encourage folks to sit down with us at the office to kind of run through and talk through the scenarios of what makes sense. Had a couple of conversations just this past week, and the conclusion wound up being different for those folks, depending upon one who had planning on continuing to work, was doing well, didn't necessarily need the extra money. Okay, fine. In that case, great. Okay, let Social Security build up, and you'll have more. The other, situation was, if I stop working, then I'm going to need something to bridge that gap. So in that case, taking Social Security made sense. That's why we spend a lot of time with folks at the office at Nelson Financial Planning, kind of going through the different scenarios of what makes sense in terms of the overall structure and timing of Social Security. One of the biggest roles that Rob Field, who's regular co-host on the program, serves as he's our resident National Social Security advisor, where he kind of walks through all the different scenarios on that. So just some of the things to be thinking about as you think about retirement, and recognizing that, there's a couple different phases there that you really need to kind of work through and think through that are equally important. So we've got some key takeaways on all of this when we return after these messages. So this is Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning, and you're listening to Dollars and Cents. Another full show here on Dollars and Cents. My name, of course, is Joel Garris, certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary at Nelson Financial Planning. Don't forget to request your free copy of our companion workbook to our book, Next Gen Dollars and Cents, that we published a couple of years ago. Obviously, very well received the book was, and we thought, well, it's probably time for an update. There were a lot of changes over the course of the past couple of years. So the workbook includes a lot of the updates, particularly from a tax, estate planning, Social Security, retirement type of perspective. Nearly every chapter has its own update in the companion workbook. But most importantly, we heard you and the need to provide an opportunity to really have some exercises to work through and to help people get a better understanding of what does it mean to actually be creating a budget? What does it mean when I'm trying to decide between a 30-year mortgage versus a 15-year mortgage, and give some written exercise along with answer keys. We're not going to have you totally struggle. But the reality is that the point is to help you make better decisions with your hard-earned dollars. We were talking about earlier in the program the notion of categorizing your assets based on whether they fall under the umbrella of that they're going to pass courtesy of operation of law, operation of contract, or by operation of your will. There's a pretty big difference between those three, as we talked about earlier in the program. That's one of the many exercises. I think that's in chapter 19 that is included in our companion workbook. So much as like when we publish the book, we offer it free for just our listening audience and obviously our clients of Nelson Financial Planning. To get your free copy, just call the office at 407-629-6477 or visit our website at Nelson Financial Planning, and happy to rush out a copy of our companion workbook. Also going to be up on Amazon as well. Not there yet, simply because the workbook actually, the publisher actually got it out earlier than what was expected. So that was good. Nice to have all of that out ahead of time, right? I mean, that's a rarity in today's world, getting stuff done ahead of time. So anyway, the companion workbook out for not just you and your spouse, and to help improve your personal decision making when it comes to your finances, but your kids and your grandkids. Give them some of the tools that we think are unfortunately missing out there in the world at large, to help them be able to ultimately get a better handle on kind of making better financial decisions. And that was kind of what we were talking about earlier in terms of that exercise of categorizing different types of assets. In the earlier part of the program, we were talking about some of the tips for dying better, involving making sure that you understand the difference between how assets pass. Common misconception there is people think that, if I got a will, then all my assets are going to avoid probate. That's not actually the case in any way, shape, or form. It's the opposite of that. The will basically is the document that is going to go through probate. So make sure you take the time to check your registrations and verify your beneficiaries as well. Obviously, there's a collection of documents that are pretty important when it comes to helping make sure that your latter years are smooth. Those would include sort of the three documents that would be a power of attorney, a healthcare surrogate, living will. All of those give someone the ability to operate in your capacity while you are still living. So make sure you choose wisely as to who that person is. And then trusts obviously are a way, effectively, it's a contract that specifies out the guardrails and the parameters upon which you want your money to transfer to whoever it is, whether it's the next generation or any type of organization, things like that. You use a trust. We like to say you use a trust when you don't trust your beneficiaries. And that's usually kind of how that works out, because if you name somebody as a direct beneficiary on an account, they're going to get that money without any strings attached the second you die. If you've got a trust, then guess what? That's going to ultimately then come into play and present whatever the guardrails are that are in that trust document. Taxes are still a thing. We didn't quite get to that earlier in the program, but yeah, they're still a thing. Not so much estate or gift types of taxes, although these days you might have to do an informational gift return. I think the most important thing to remember is that you've got to look at the nature of the assets. If it's a bunch of retirement assets, then know that that is going to create some tax implications on an ordinary income basis. Typically, the rule now is you get to kind of spread that out over a 10-year period of time, but there's certainly can be some surprises on that. People think, oh, I inherited a bunch of money, I'm not going to have to pay any taxes. The reality is it depends on the nature of what you inherited. The reality is that if you inherited a retirement account, then yes, you're going to have to pay some taxes on that as you take that money out. So really take the time to kind of work through these various items to make sure that you're properly planning from an estate planning perspective and dying effectively in the best possible shape that you can be by simply following these types of parameters. And then, as we were talking about in the prior segment, don't forget the 2 phases of retirement. A lot of folks think that the latter years in retirement are going to be the more expensive years. And that's actually not the case. It's the years when you're young and can do things like run over to Oktoberfest, which is what one of our recently retired couples at Nelson Financial Planning did just this past weekend. Had a blast, sent me a picture, loved it. Looks like they were having a fun time with 10,000 of their closest German friends under the under a tent. But yeah, fun times like that. But guess what? If you're going to do that, that costs money. And what the studies show is that when you are younger, in the earlier years of retirement, that's when you're going to spend actually more money doing stuff just like that. So make sure you prepared and understand that, hey, there's a couple of different phases here that are going on, and have a plan of action for how you're going to approach those first few years. Just like you want to have plan of action in terms of sort of that financial part, make sure you also have a plan of action for what you're going to do in terms of your time. Now, running over to Oktoberfest is fantastic, but you can't really do that every week, right? It's only like 3 weeks anyway. What are you going to do the rest of the 49 weeks, if you will? And those are the important things to kind of be thinking about. Okay, how am I going to spend my time in retirement? That's why anytime I have a conversation with someone who's thinking about retiring, I always start it off with, well, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? I mean, before we even get to the conversation about the finances, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? Because I mean, obviously you need to have the money to retire in the first place, but you need to have a plan of action. Otherwise, there's a lot of studies out there that say that you could very well wind up having some pretty significant health issues, because despite the fact that we all like to complain about work, the reality is that work has some very valuable things with it in terms of cognition, in terms of emotion and relationships and all of those kinds of things that are, in fact, pretty valuable. And then even though you're retired, make sure you continue to maintain an emergency savings account. Make sure you continue to maintain a budget. Also, that is pretty important. That's not just something that you want to have as you're working. You want to continue those good habits when you retire as well, because emergencies can still happen, and you don't want to overspend what your retirement income is, just like you don't want to overspend your work income while you are working. So, and then last, I think we talked a little bit about Social Security as well. Obviously, that's an individual decision. We encourage you to look at all of your options and kind of know all of the nuances, because there's no perfect answer, if you will. Everything is there. When you start to talk about Social Security and collecting it, is all about sort of trade-offs. Take it now, take it later. What's that differential going to be? Anyway, with that, we're going to start to get wrapped on up and get on out of here for this week's program of Dollars and Cents. We certainly appreciate you listening to our program. If you think we can be of assistance to you in the days, weeks, and months ahead, we encourage you to go to our website at Nelson Financial Planning. And once you're there, go ahead and fill out that contact button, and we'll immediately connect you over and get you on the calendar of one of our certified financial fiduciaries here at Nelson Financial Planning. Enjoy the rest of the day.